Okay, Mrs. Dobson has a schedule conflict today, so we appreciate her being here and meeting all of our members, and thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I can't be with you the rest of the morning, but thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of the chamber that you said. Truly,
Thank you so much. Okay, good morning again. As I'm sure you know, the Chamber is a strong supporter of our business community, and we want to make sure that all of our members are aware of the issues that impact the city of Montgomery, as well as our surrounding counties. Today's program is just one of the ways your Chamber works to unite the business community and elected leaders around shared economic development priorities to grow our economy and increase prosperity for everyone in our area. It is important to our Chamber that our business community has direct access to local, state, and national issues that can impact all of us directly. Our Chamber team wakes up every day with an agenda on how to best serve its members. So I would like to recognize Anna Buckaloo, President and CEO of the Chamber, and her entire staff for putting this event together and for hosting it for us today. It's such an honor this year for me to be chairman of the board and be able to work with this amazing staff. So thank you for all that you did. Okay, also before we get started, I'd like to recognize all of our elected officials here this morning. And I'm just going to ask everybody to stand. That's an elected official. And we're just going to go around, and if you will just provide your name and what you do.
Good morning. Mayor Tony Higgins, City of Tuskegee, happy to be here working with Montgomery and the River region.
Good morning. I'm County Commissioner Carmen Moore Ziegler for District 2. And thank you for what you're doing right here today. We need this. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brenda Ramis-Coleman, Chair of the Montgomery County Board of Education, elected by District 3.
Good morning. I'm Fernetta Riley, District 4, City Council person. Thank you for having us.
Good morning, I'm Charles Fenwright, City Councilman, District 9.
Good morning, Isaiah Sankey, Vice Chairman, Montgomery County Commission, representing District 4.
Let's give them a big round of applause. Okay, let's get started, as I know your time is valuable, and we only have an hour to hear from our candidates. Mr. Brewbaker, Mr. Daniels, and Mr. Figures, your presence today indicates that you realize Montgomery is a major factor in this congressional district. Not only are we in the middle of the 2nd district that spans from Mississippi to Georgia, but we are also the capital city of this great state of Alabama, and all roads lead here. We are honored to have all of you join us, and thank you for sharing your time. Before I turn the floor over to our moderator, let's quickly establish some conversation guidelines. The candidates will have up to 3 minutes to introduce themselves and make opening comments. There are a total of 8 questions. Candidates will have up to 90 seconds to answer each question. Time begins after the moderator has read the question and recognized each candidate by name. Our timekeeper is at the back of the room, Sandra, and will signify 30 seconds remaining by holding up a yellow sign. And time's up with the red stop sign. Once the stop sign goes up, candidates must cease answering the question. Conversation guidelines were emailed to the candidates beforehand and have all acknowledged being received. Finally, we kindly ask that all guests please silence your phones and give your undivided attention to these candidates. Now to Martha Roby, who is a perfect panel moderator for our meeting today. Martha brings her experience to this discussion as a lifelong resident of the capital city, former member of the Montgomery City Council, and a 10-year member of Alabama's 2nd Congressional District representing the capital city. Thank you, Martha, for moderating today's coffee and conversations. I'm going to turn it over to you.
good morning, everybody. I have to acknowledge the fact that it feels really good to not be on stage right now. But with that, I want to say to each of the candidates that are here, and Caroleene for making the effort to be here this morning as well, thank you for your willingness to put your name on the ballot and run. I've told many of you, probably heard me say this, if you want to find out who your real friends are, put your name on the ballot, and you'll find out real fast. And then when you leave, you really find out who your friends are, whether they'll still talk to you or take your call. But I digress. Anyway, let me just again say thank you. I want to say to each and everybody here how refreshing it is to have 4 extremely qualified candidates to choose from in Alabama's new 2nd Congressional District. And so again, I applaud each of you for your willingness to run. And then let me just say, it's no small thing, I applaud each of your families for their support of you running. I know how difficult that can be, particularly in this political environment, which is like nothing we've ever seen. So thank you for your willingness to be here today. There are no I gotcha questions. This is merely an opportunity for the business community here in this room to learn more about you and hear your approach specifically as it relates to the river region. I would just ask, as you have all been so considerate throughout the campaign, that you be considerate to one another and abide by the time. I'm not going to cut you off, but if you'll just wrap up whatever sentence you're in on when you see the red sign go up. I'll rotate through the line. I'll try to get it right. If I don't, somebody just correct me. So we'll start with you, Mr. Figures. What do you see as the biggest challenge for the district, and what would you or could you do in Congress to address it?
Good morning. Thank you to the chamber.
Hey, sorry, my bad, I already messed up. We're supposed to do opening statements. Okay, sorry. But now I'm on with my first question, so you can think about that. See, you picked the wrong gal to do this. And I have nothing to be nervous about. Okay, we're going to do, how long do they have for opening statements? 3 minutes. Each of you get 3 minutes for opening statements. Mr. Figures, please go ahead.
Good morning. I'll now do an opening statement. But thank you, Congresswoman. Once a Congresswoman or a Congressman, always a member of that esteemed body, and we value your service and all elected officials here, the service that you provide to your communities, because at the end of the day, it's about giving back. It's about taking what God has given you in the form of resources and experiences and talents and skill sets and putting them to use for the betterment of the people and places that mean the most to you. And that's why I got in this race. That's why I went into a career in federal government service, and I know my colleagues here on the stage share that sentiment. But I'm Shomari Figures, and born and raised in Mobile, Alabama. Many of you know my parents, State Senator Vivian Figures and the late State Senator and Civil Rights Attorney Michael Figures. But they raised me up in that same spirit that we just spoke about the importance of working to give back to your communities. And that's what sent me into government service, because I grew up in Alabama. I grew up black in Alabama, and I've known that it has always taken the federal government in many cases to make this state do right by the people here in this state. And so that's what spurred me into a career in federal government service that took me to the highest levels of federal government, working for a president in the White House, working at the top of a federal agency with senior leaders there, and spending time working in Congress. But more importantly, and more relevant to this conversation is what a lot of people don't know about me is I'm also a business owner here in the state of Alabama. And so I know what it's like to run a business. I know what it's like to deal with significant revenues. I know what it's like to navigate the challenges of municipal and county and state and federal regulatory regimes. But most importantly, I know what the jobs mean to the people that work with us. I know what that paycheck means to them. I know what that skill development means to their future. I know how important our small businesses are. I know how important they are to driving this economy, to driving the state, to driving the future of the, I'll say the hundreds of people who have worked with us over the years. It's important, and it's vital that anybody that's going to Congress takes that view with them. Because at the end of the day, as the son of a small business owner, the husband of a small business owner, and a small business owner myself, I know that small businesses is what drive the American economy, and it's what drives the economy in this state and in this region. And so as a congressman, I will be 100% committed to not losing sight of that and making sure that we're doing everything that we can do to grow and thrive and make this district a place where families want to be, where employers want to be, where workers want to be, where retirees want to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brewbaker.
Thank you, Martha. You know, one thing I didn't expect when I got into a race for Congress is that it's amazing what a small world politics is. I mean, I served with Representative Daniels for 12 years in the legislature, and I sat next to Vivian every Wednesday for 8 years when I chaired the Education Committee and she was the vice chair. So it's great that there are people in the race that are good people and highly qualified public servants. My name is Dick Brewbaker. I've lived here all my life. My family, as most of you know, ran Brewbaker Motors. I've run a business here. The day we closed, we had 99 employees. And I understand the importance of economic development in this town in which we all share. It is my father and grandfather both had a little framed thing on their office wall that said, "Live in your community, not off of it." Ooh. And I think that's important. When I got back from college, I did two things. I joined the National Guard and got a job teaching school. When my grandfather decided he wanted to do something, Brewbaker School, or out on into Bell Road and Troy Highway. But it's important to grow up in a town that you actually care about what happens to it. I have tried to get back in public service. I think there's some people in this room that might have actually benefited from my public service. If you've got a family member touched by autism and you're covered by a state insurance plan, if I hadn't been in the state senate, that bill never gets out of that chamber. You can ask anybody who's there. If you've got ever been taking advantage of any of the school choice options that are available now, I passed the first charter bill out of the state senate, and I was not clairvoyant, but in 2015, I passed the Virtual School Act, which required every school system to have a virtual plan in case something happened. Now, in my mind, I had a tornado happening and knocking down 2 schools, not nobody being able to go to school. But when COVID hit, everybody had a plan. And also, sometimes government gets out of its lane. When one of our state superintendents announced his intention to take over governance of non-public schools and eliminate homeschooling, I passed a bill that kept public schools in their lane, and private schools and homeschools in their lane, which I think is worthwhile. But most of all, I love this place, and I just want to keep serving. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels.
Good morning. Thank you for having this, certainly the Chamber of Commerce and all of you for being here this morning. I'm Anthony Daniels, grew up in Midway, Alabama, in Bullock County, raised primarily by my grandparents who were sharecroppers until 1978, about 4 years before I was born. But what they instilled in me at a very early age is faith and hard work, and keeping your word and doing what you say you're going to do, but also serve others. Then I had an opportunity to go to Alabama A&M University, where I majored in elementary education, have a bachelor's in elementary education, and a master's degree in special education. At the age of 23, I was elected chairman of the National Education Association, where I had to leave school to go to Washington, D.C. and serve at the National Education Association's headquarters. During that time of serving as chairman of the National Education Association, I took on an issue that was very personal to me and personal to those that are coming behind me. I took on the issue of college access and affordability. I worked closely with Senator Ted Kennedy, as well as Chairman George Miller and the Bush administration, around my story of having $58,000 in student loan debt, but going into a public service career like education. And so a year and a half into my term, I put all of my eggs in that basket. And a year and a half into my term, the College Cost and Reduction Act was passed and signed into law. That's what sparked my interest in policy. but I decided to return to Alabama and teach 3rd grade at a public magnet school, 4th grade at a Title I school, and 4th, 5th grade on an Indian reservation. During that tenure, what it taught me was that every parent, regardless of whatever setting they're in, they wanted their child to be successful. And so I got an opportunity to look at it from an educator or practitioner standpoint, but now seeing it as a parent. And so my position has evolved and focusing more on outcomes. During my tenure in the Alabama legislature, I was elected in 2014, elected in 2017 as the House Minority Leader by my colleagues. During my tenure, I had an opportunity to work across the aisle, work on both sides of the aisle on issues that are common to all Alabamians. Most recently, I passed legislation last year that eliminates the income tax on overtime pay. I came up with the idea and executed that legislation through a Republican supermajority. I've also worked with Senator Beasley and others to reduce the prescription drug costs in Alabama. I also carry a lot of the economic development bills, whether it's helping with the Jobs Act, supporting the SEES Act, but also providing opportunity for Innovate Alabama to distribute more dollars to create more opportunities for entrepreneurship within the state of Alabama. And so for me, I've done the work, and I'm asking you for a promotion to send me to Congress to continue what I started. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. So the first question will start with you, Mr. Brewbaker. What do you see as the biggest challenge for the district, and what would or could you do in Congress to address it?
Well, the biggest challenge for this new, very, in my opinion, oddly drawn district is the fact that we have 13 counties in the district and 12 of them are losing population. Realize that? 12 out of 13. Rural Alabama is disappearing before our eyes. In 2007, if you have anything to do with agriculture, you know that there was a bad drought. And the cattle herds were sold off and never restocked. We have got to do whatever we can to find a way to revitalize small town Alabama. Also, we need good public policy that caters to the sort of industry that we have here, like transplants. I mean, let's face it, most of Alabama's, especially manufacturing growth, comes from second wave manufacturers. And by that I mean transplants. Airbus, Hyundai, Mercedes, people like that. Some of you may know that in 2017, newly elected President Trump called for a tariff that would have just made it very difficult for these transplants to be competitive. And I was one of the people that spoke out about that because transplants are vital to an economy like Alabama's. But if you really want to fix the economy around here, fix the schools, and that's the best thing you can do for business people. Thank you.
Mr. Daniels, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the district, and what would you do or could you do in Congress to address it?
Thank you for that question. There are many challenges in the district. 11 out of the 13 counties are rural communities. As he mentioned, there are a significant number of production and growth and opportunity in a lot of the rural areas within the state of Alabama. What I see as an opportunity is the 5 military installations that we have in this district that are directly in this district or in proximity. I see an opportunity for growth. I know that there's an industrial park here in the Montgomery area, but there has to be more opportunities for our university to be able to leverage our universities to be able to, so that we can get to the point to where we have a research park. And so leveraging the military installations, there should not be poverty outside the walls of the military base. And so for me, I will prioritize the military bases in order to drive growth of the region. I will focus on our education system, universal pre-K. We know that every dollar invested in early childhood saves you $7 in corrections, which is why in my role as minority leader, I've pushed the government to adding over 184 new pre-K classrooms within the state of Alabama in communities where they don't have the pipeline and they don't have the foundation. Healthcare is a challenge. When a mother, an expected mother in Monroe County, have to drive 114 miles one way and 90 miles the other way just to be able to give birth to a child, that's unconscionable. And so healthcare is a challenge there. And so with the district, because of this uniqueness, you got to be able to diversify your interests, which is why I believe that as businesses, we have to get together. We have to take responsibility in our own communities. We have to make certain that our school system is not just because our children are not in the schools, doesn't mean that school should not be a priority for you. If we're talking about growing the region, growing opportunity, Brian Stevenson is doing an excellent job of attracting tourism to the Montgomery region. But we have to do our part of we have to do our part and making certain that we are growing the entire area.
I don't want to cut you off, but it's a well past time. I don't want to be the bad guy, but let's be fair.
I'm sorry, I'm just getting in the rhythm.
Pay attention to, okay. So I know it's easy to lose track of time, so I just don't want to cut
I
you
thought
off.
she was taking the time, not my opponent.
Okay, Mr. Figures.
I want to just make sure everybody plays by the same rules. But the,
I appreciate that. School by the candidates up here.
Look, at the end of the day, whoever goes to Congress, they have to make sure that they have a line of communication open to all of these 13 counties and all of the cities and towns in this district to make sure that we understand the uniqueness of the problems that they face in their communities. But I will say there is one consistent theme that I think is the biggest challenge in District 2, and it's a challenge across this entire state, and that's life itself. How many people here were born in the state of Alabama? All right, well, you'll run me off the stage after this. If you're born in the state of Alabama, you are expected to die before anybody else born anywhere in the United States except 2 states, and I'm sure everybody can guess one of them. Mississippi and West Virginia. They got us beat by just a couple of months. And if it weren't so true, it would indeed be funny. We have not expanded Medicare in this state, Medicaid in this state, I'm sorry. And we have to, because we are dying far too soon in the state of Alabama. In the state of Alabama, you're expected to live just past your 60s. Just past your 60s, early 70s. That's up to 15 years lower than other states across this country. And so, when we talk about big challenges facing the district, it starts with life itself. But in terms of growth and prosperity throughout the district itself, we have to start with the focus on our education systems. We have to start by treating our teachers and our school support personnel as if they are the single most important profession to the future of this district, this state, and this country, because they are. We have to make investments in them. And that's where I would start, and I'm going to stop, because she told me.
I appreciate it. I'm probably never going to be asked to do this again. Okay, we'll start with you, Mr. Daniels. What would be your first and second committee interest choice and why?
Armed Services will be my first committee choice because of the uniqueness of this district of having 5 military installations, and with an emphasis on the growth of focus on growth of growing the region by using military installations to do that. The second committee will be agriculture. Because of the uniqueness of the 11 out of the 13 counties being rural, focusing on agriculture and the growth of agriculture and creating more agricultural jobs, and also putting those owners of those farmers in a better position to be able to export goods and services in order to grow the local economies in their area. And I think the third thing for me, I know that you asked for 2, but education is one. As I mentioned, the early childhood education, creating opportunity for workforce development within the region, going down to the middle school level, ensuring that we're getting students interested in their career path as early as middle school, so that we can create pathways in high schools, and then partner with business and industry so that they have an opportunity to be able to go into the professions that they just not dream of, but the professions that make sense for the region and growth for District 2.
Thank you. I will just say I served on all 3 of those committees my first 3 years in Congress. I served on 7 subcommittees, and everyone in this room at some point took a meeting with me out in the hallway. So be careful what you wish for. All great committees. Mr. Figures.
I would say the first is a pipe dream, given a freshman member of Congress, but it's one that I would certainly make the ask of, and that's appropriations. That's because you have the ability to impact every other aspect of what the federal government is funding through the Appropriations Committee. I'm a huge believer in earmarks. I believe in earmarks. I believe the death of earmarks in Congress was not a good thing for a collaborative environment, certainly not a good thing for being able to steer funding to states and municipalities and counties for specific projects. We have to get back to that. I come from Mobile right now. Mobile is in the midst of of 3 big infrastructure projects that have impacts, that will have impacts throughout the state, throughout this region. Expanding the port, dredging out the port so that it can take on more container ships to ship more goods up through the state. Relocating our airport from out in the county to downtown and making it international. And also rebuilding the I-10 bridge, which I-10 is the longest interstate in the country, running from Jacksonville to LA straight through Mobile, and the ability to get more goods up. Second would be transportation and infrastructure. For that same reason. There are too many infrastructure projects, whether it's the inland port here in Montgomery, whether it's our highway systems. And I'd also like to get to a world where we can treat broadband expansion through the same lens as we do infrastructure projects. And so that's what I would focus on. Those would be the committee assignments that I would like.
As a former appropriator, I can appreciate that as well. So, Mr. Brewbaker.
Well, I agree, appropriations would be my first choice as well, but I agree with Shomari that is rather unlikely. Back in the real world of freshmen, I would put infrastructure first, transportation infrastructure. Whether you're talking about Barber County or infrastructure between Mobile and Montgomery, Alabama has so many projects that are going to be crucial to its growth, and it's not all one city against another. Sometimes the way we talk up here, it sounds like, what's good for Mobile is somehow not going to be good for Montgomery. But that $110 million container port we're building on the river in Montgomery is going to look pretty silly, empty, if we can't get the containers out of Mobile. So a lot of this is connected, and what's good for one is going to be good for another. And I think infrastructure, transportation infrastructure is a place where you can really put your hand on a lot. Armed services would be second. Some of y'all may not know, my oldest son is a career soldier. He's a member of the 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers at Fort Moore. Been employed 4 times, about to go off to the great unknown again here very shortly, which makes his father extremely nervous. And my third is agriculture. The Farm Bill's been in trouble lately. It's become a lot about other things, but not about farming. I mean, it's got food stamps in it, all sorts of small projects, and I'll stop.
Thank you so much. All excellent choices, and there's some inside baseball that happens on committee selection, so if anybody wants some free advice, it's never too early to start working on your committee assignments even before the election. So happy to discuss offline if you would like. Okay, Mr. Figures, what would you propose to address the current healthcare challenges, particularly related to rural hospitals and the healthcare gap?
I think it starts with the state of Alabama finally doing what 46 other states have already done and expanding Medicaid. That will provide additional health care coverage to up to 330,000 people by some estimates, which provides more funding for hospitals when people go and use those services in these rural communities. That's a big issue. That's a huge challenge. As I said earlier, like Alabama has the lowest life expectancy, basically virtually the lowest life expectancy in the United States of America, which is entirely unacceptable. So it starts there. I think it also starts with us being able to channel more funding into our rural communities, particularly if the state legislature and the governor are not going to expand Medicaid. We need to figure out how we get those resources directly into the counties to provide some of those services and some of those wraparound healthcare services there at a local level. We also have to make investments and work with our existing healthcare providers throughout the state to actually supplement some of the services that have left our rural communities. Not having a hospital is not just a healthcare issue, it's an economic issue as well. How do you recruit a company to come in when you tell them, like, yeah, you can come here, but if a worker gets hurt on the job, you have to go an hour to a hospital? You can't. And so I think we have to look at this through a holistic lens driven by healthcare, but also the economic impact that having a failing healthcare system in too many parts of the state are having on businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Brewbaker.
Thank you. When we talk about healthcare and expanding Medicaid, there are 3 sort of tests. Is it affordable? Is it accessible? And is the quality adequate? I mean, those are the 3 questions that ought to inform our decisions as public policy makers. And, I don't disagree with my colleague here to this extent. One thing we found out through the Affordable Care Act is, let's just keep it on Alabama Medicaid. If you go into the District 2, where we want to represent, There are a lot of food processing plants and places like that that pay hourly wages, and they're not big money jobs. But a lot of those companies are providing private health insurance. What we know for a fact, that if you expand Medicaid through the coverage gap, those employers will drop that company health insurance. If the state's going to give it to them for free, why should we pay for it privately? Problem is, only 15% of Alabama doctors are taking Medicaid patients. So all of those employees lose access to their family care guy and have to wind up in an emergency room seeking clinic care, which is not what anybody wants. Now, it's also true that if you expand Medicaid through the coverage gap, you'll help UAB, USA, and the big medical centers. But who do you want to prioritize? The patients or the institutions? So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
So Medicaid expansion is a sole action from the governor of Alabama, showing an interest in it. But as a member of Congress, I would introduce legislation to allow the state of Alabama to start over to be able to receive a 100% match. And I think that that would drive an interest in expanding Medicaid. I would also look at a hybrid model. When you talk about the fiscal part of it, you do have to strike somewhat of a balance, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so what we have right now before us and having conversation in the Alabama legislature that we're currently having conversation about is a hybrid model where 150 patients that have their private insurance would not lose their private insurance. But the gap for the other 150,000 or more that need access to health care will be able to go on to an expansion or go into the exchange. And so there's a delicate balance that you have to have, understanding that, yeah, we're in a state that's been very resistant to expanding Medicaid, but in order to, and that's the art of being a person that actually can work and negotiate, is being able to negotiate and work to ensure that we're passing something that's reasonable, that's accepted, but also solves the problem. So we have to be we cannot be as careless as we were before with other pieces of legislation. That's how that's the only way that we're going to be able to expand Medicaid and drive health coverage and opportunity for the region.
Thank you. Mr. Brewbaker.
Yes.
Agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Alabama and a major industry in Alabama too. Based on either your prior experience or your experiences in this race, please address the challenges and how you, as a member of Congress, would work for Alabama's farmers and foresters.
I'm glad you.
Okay, on the list. Where's Ned Walker? He's gonna, I'm gonna get.
Glad you asked that question. Okay. First of all, back to what we said a little while ago. In essentially all of the rural counties in District 2, they're losing people. The drought in District 2, especially since they've redistricted, a lot of the wiregrass, the row crop areas have been taken out of the district, and it's much more predominantly livestock. In 2007, when the grass died, people sold off their herds. They couldn't afford to feed them, so they got rid of them. Most of the farmers that were farming those cows did not restock because they didn't think their sons and their children were coming back to the farm. And a lot of formerly productive cattle land has been moved into other things. And the problem is when you lose the large percentage of your cattle herd, the stockyards in small towns begin to close down, the seed and supply companies and the towns begin to wither. I don't think it's unreasonable for the federal government to take a more active role in trying to restore an important industry that a severe 100-year drought destroyed. I don't think that should be an entirely state responsibility. And I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels, agriculture, challenges, priorities.
So currently in the Alabama legislature, I have a track record of working with our farmers and making certain that we're providing the appropriate tax credits for all of our farmers, that's small farmers and large farmers, so that they are able to produce. I'm making sure they have access to capital. I know that the Farm Bill is in limbo, and there are a lot of challenges at the federal level. And so because I'm a consensus builder, I'll focus on ways to try to drive consensus around the Farm Bill, and where everyone is giving up something or getting to the point to where we're able to negotiate. Because in this particular district, as you mentioned, we're losing growth and opportunity and we're losing population. However, the products that are being produced by a lot of farmers are being exported. And so therefore, it has little to do with the actual population, but more to do with the opportunity. And so we have to incentivize more farmers starting up. We also have to encourage and incentivize expansion of the current farm, and we have to integrate more technology so that we're able to produce at a much higher rate, which will drive opportunity and growth to the region.
Thank you. Mr. Figurs.
I think we've all touched on it a little bit here, and Senator Brewbaker just mentioned it when he said that farmers didn't restock because they didn't think their children were coming back. That's not a dynamic that's just unique to farming in this district, throughout most of the counties in this district. When people drop their kids off to college, they know there's a 99% chance they're not coming back to Crenshaw County, or Bullock County, or Pike County, or Russell County, or Barber County. And so we have to do what we must to get the sort of life infrastructure in place in a lot of these counties that will make it more attractive for the younger generations to return, including the kids of our farmers. Look, there's a lot of unused farmland throughout the state of Alabama, throughout this country, and we have to be innovative in how we go about incentivizing the farmers to repurpose the use of that land for an economy of the future. That looks like incorporating technology. That looks like getting people to think outside the box in terms of where our agricultural industry has been and where it is headed. But at the end of the day, if we're going to incentivize people to come back to these communities and come back and pick up the trades that have driven Alabama, we have to understand, like, look, this economy has always flown from rural Alabama. And we can't forget that. We can't leave them behind. So we have to make sure that these communities have the resources and infrastructure that they need. Broadband expansion is critical to this as well. To making sure that these communities, we can't have high-tech farms if they can't access broadband internet. So we have to make sure that we're investing in the basics of community infrastructure to actually drive the future of our agricultural industry.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels, I'll address all the candidates because you're getting the same question again. Mr. Daniels, so looking at the large military footprint in Alabama too, whether it's physically located or nearby, Maxwell Gunter, Air University, the 908, the 187, and not to mention, not to leave out the defense industrial complex that's all around us here in the river region. Talk about your, again, challenges, your priorities, and also, as we know, depending on the administration's, whatever administration is in charge, what their priorities may be related to base realignment and closure is always looming, so steps that we can be taking to mitigate any impact to our military footprint here in the river region and the state of Alabama.
So what we have is, you mentioned that we have about 5 military bases that are in proximity or directly impacts Congressional District 2. So what we have to do is look at the uniqueness of each of those installations. And looking at the uniqueness of those installations, we have to be able to drive growth of the region by partnering with their local and county government and state government to be able to build a footprint, a strategic plan to be able to drive opportunities. For example, having more defense companies coming into the state of Alabama within the 2nd Congressional District. Well, you have to make certain that whatever that defense company, the priorities of that defense company, have to make certain that there's workforce development opportunities with your K-12 system, your community college, and if there's a higher education, a 4-year institution there. And so there has to be a strategic plan in order to get to first base. In many instances, some of these areas, like Montgomery, is closer than most other areas within the region. And so we just got to be able to drive growth and opportunity through the region by partnering with the local government to ensure that we have what it takes to accommodate another base realignment and opportunity for families to come to Alabama.
Thank you. Mr. Figurs. Sure, I've looked a little bit, but other than what's on the paper. As we all know, that we have a large military footprint in Alabama's 2nd District, whether it's located directly in or nearby, with Maxwell Gunter, Air University, the 908, the 187, not to leave out the defense industrial complex all around us. What do you see as challenges and priorities related to our military footprint and things that we need to be doing in order to mitigate a potential base realignment and closure priority of the incoming administration, should that be on their list?
You have to be willing to lay it all on the line to keep the military bases open in the state of Alabama that we have, and those that support jobs in the state of Alabama. You just have to be. Our troops, they are prepared when they sign up for the military. They are signing up to put it all on the line for us, and so we need to put it all on the line for them and their families, because when you talk about realignment and base closures, that affects real families and real economics here locally. Because if you move those families out, they aren't spending their money here in these local economies. So we have to be doing that, and in Congress I would certainly do that. Mobile, where I'm from, they lost a big military base a few decades back in Brookwood Field. And communities and significant parts of that city never recovered, including the neighborhood my mother grew up in. So I know what that looks like. But listen, we have to incorporate our workforce to be able to work around the industries that flow from our defense, from the presence of the Department of Defense in this state. And so what that looks like is creating partnerships, K through 12, community colleges, as well as with our four-year institutions that recognize the value of the value and the presence of our military installations. We also need to look at life after the military for the people who serve in the military. Most people don't serve 20 years or 30 years in the military. They're looking for jobs outside of the military once their tenure is up. And so we have to incentivize making sure that we have veteran-focused workforce development programs to prepare them to take on the jobs in the industries that flow from the same career which they were just leaving.
Thank you. Mr. Brewbaker.
Thank you. It wasn't that long ago when the commanding general of Maxwell surprised, I can't remember whether it was the Lions Club or the Kiwanis Club, but essentially told the city fathers of Montgomery, if you guys don't make this a better living environment for military families, you're going to lose the base. Anybody remember that? And what he was talking about was the schools. To get an assignment to the Air War College or to Gunner was supposed to be a plum. But so many military families viewed it as a place, Montgomery as a place they didn't want to bring their families, that less than half of those officers were bringing their families, which made it a hardship to them. And Maxwell is important for Montgomery. And the city and the state and the county school board have begun the process of giving military families more options in Montgomery, and that's good. But we have got to make, if we want to keep military bases, the problem is, especially a military base like Maxwell, it's a big military college, essentially. It's pretty easy to shut that base down, one mission at a time, without making a big hue and cry. They've already closed the NCO Academy. I know that. So, I mean, they can shut these missions down gradually, and we won't even feel it until it's too late. Talk time is over. When it comes to education and housing and opportunity for military families, it's time for Montgomery and all of our government officials to step up and do whatever is necessary to keep them here. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I ask the next question, I want to give you a little bit of background. When I came into Congress in 2011, there were no more what we then called earmarks. There was no process by which to direct funding to state and local governments. In the past 3 cycles, the House and the Senate have brought back a process which is conveniently called community-directed spending to get away from the negative earmark word, but essentially community-directed spending is an earmark. The process, though, is now very transparent in that members of Congress that request money for certain projects within their district can do so as submitted by those communities, and then have to publicly advertise which projects that they submitted. So they are then held accountable for where that money goes. And then should they be accepted by the subcommittees on appropriations and get in the underlying bill, then those communities would be in receipt of those funds. So my question is very, very simple. Mr. Figures, would you be willing to participate in the community-directed spending?
I didn't know this question was coming, but I answered it earlier. I'm a big proponent of directed spending. have to be, look, the number one job of a congressman, in my opinion, well, according to the Constitution, two job responsibilities laid out: power to declare war and power of appropriations. It's to go to Washington, D.C. and bring back the federal dollars that the people and the workers have been paying for decades in your community, to be able to bring that money back to support the local initiatives and local projects and stimulate your local economy. That is the job. That is the primary job of a congressman. There are others as well, but that is what we are. That's what's at stake here, is sending somebody there to bring home the bacon, as they used to call it. So I would 100% participate in community directed spending. I think obviously we have to do so in a realm that is responsible and informed and conscious and ethical, and making sure that the projects that we are supporting are projects that are absolutely necessary and that they absolutely have a proven track record of being the types of projects that will actually stimulate the economy, maintain jobs, and actually be conducive to future growth of the communities across this district. So yes, yes, I will participate.
Thank you. Mr. Brewbaker, would you be willing to participate in the community-directed spending process?
First, after I declared I was going to run for Congress, I was fortunate enough to be on Capital Journal. It was the first televised thing I did having to do with the Congressional race. And I said that one of the things I was not planning on doing was joining the Freedom Caucus because of their position on earmarks or community-directed spending. And the thing, and here's the thing, if it's completely unlimited, and there was some legitimate criticism of the way the earmark process was working, but surely we can call balls and strikes. Surely we know what's appropriate for the federal government and what's not. And the criticism was that it had become transactional. You know, this for you, this for me, regardless of whether or not both projects were appropriate for federal intervention. I think that we're smart enough to establish a system where reasonable people decide what's appropriate for federal intervention and send that money to those communities. And let's face it, in a state like Alabama, and especially in the situation we're in right now, we need all the help we can get. And if the feds are willing to pitch in, I'm certainly willing to let them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels.
Absolutely. I'm doing it right now in my current role as a legislator and as the House Minority Leader of distributing funding back into the community, making certain that it is a part where supporting our local government and all of the organizations that are doing good work. There are a lot of folks that are out there doing great work. But we have to make certain that our spending is directed in areas that's going to yield returns for the region or for the community. And so we have to make certain that we're responsible, as Dick mentioned, we have to be responsible, but we have to be intentional. And some of the direct community funding that we have to distribute cannot be traditional in many instances. Oftentimes we give direct funding, whether it's a school or community college or even the military. And also what I've seen is some of the military defense contractors have received some direct appropriations based upon certain research projects that they're encountering. And so yes, I'll be absolutely for directing funding back into the district. I believe in appropriations. I'm an experienced legislator doing it as we speak on projects that's making a difference in my current district, but absolutely I would do that for District 2.
Thank you. And there's a collective sigh of relief. Say that? Okay. Mr. Brewbaker, District 2 includes the state's capital, several military installations, as we've already discussed, home to numerous historically significant events, and 5 higher education institutions. How would you leverage Montgomery in prioritizing district needs?
Well,
basically, we want to be first on your list.
You know, funny that everybody wants to be first on the list. But, you know, I'm from here. I think, you know, nobody would believe me if I said that Montgomery wasn't going to be a priority. I mean, I've lived here my whole life. I've raised 5 boys here. Ran a very successful business. My ancestors are buried here. It's hard to get more connected than that. But the way to do it, I think, has to do with experienced are you and how good are you at moving appropriations through a large body of political professionals who aren't nearly as interested in your hometown as you are? And, you know, modestly speaking, but in all sincerity, in the legislature, I proved that I could do it. When the Pike Road school system came up, needed an extra $3 million, it wasn't in the original package. The education chair wasn't very happy with the proposal, but I knew how. And we got it done. And it helped the community. It's been successful. The money wasn't wasted. And I will prioritize Montgomery. It's where I live. It's my hometown. But it's not all zero-sum games, like I said before. Helping Mobile widen the port also helps Montgomery use that container facility. So it's not all just game theory. Well, one gets another gets.
Mr. Daniels?
Absolutely. I have a home here in Montgomery, and I've been in Montgomery as a legislator. I'm here 4 to 5 months out of the year already. And the relationship that I have, so Montgomery will be a priority. But also because I'm from a rural community, from Bullitt County, which a couple of years ago had the second highest growth of poverty in the United States of America. And so a lot of my emphasis and where my heart lies would be in this region, but also focusing on our rural communities. Our rural communities have certainly been underfunded, underinvested in, and so that will be a priority for me. Now, looking at the needs and priorities of places like Mobile, you know, the port, addressing the port so that there be more larger ships to be able to come ashore so that we can move products to and from. But for me, seeing the dire needs that are here in the Montgomery region, it would be a priority for me. Maxwell Air Force Base will be a priority for me. All the military bases that are in proximity in this particular region, Pike County, I have family down there. I see the poverty that exists. So you got to look at and evaluate where the highest levels of poverty that exist and the opportunities. And so this region will be a priority for me, and Montgomery will certainly be.
Thank you. Mr. Figures?
I was born and raised and live in Mobile, but America owes 2 cities in this district like they owe no other city. Montgomery and Tuskegee. Those cities have paid more into the fabric of what America is than any other city in this district and almost any other city in this country. So this is not about making Montgomery a priority for me. I want to make Montgomery a priority for every member of Congress because the rights that we enjoy across this country and in some cases across this world were fought for, planned for, strategized for, marched for, bled for, died for, protested for in Montgomery, Alabama. America owes Montgomery, and I will make that known. We don't just want your support in Montgomery for a Selma to Montgomery march. We need your support in Montgomery as payback for what Montgomery did for this country. I'm not a banker, I'm a lawyer. But the way I understand it is that whoever pays in the most, that's who's supposed to get it back in return. And nobody paid a higher cost for what America is today than the city of Montgomery and the city of Tuskegee. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very important question to me, and I'm going to ask it in a very leading way, as I already have, because I've indicated to you that it's very important to me. But I need to hear from each of you, starting with Mr. Daniels, that you will commit to participating in coming back and speaking to the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce in the River Region for our Washington update, and you will be getting a phone call from me in December as planning the dates for the calendar next year. And I would just like a yes or no, will you come back and visit with us again? And I'm holding you to it, somebody's recording it.
Absolutely. It'll be right down the street from my home, so absolutely.
Mr. Figures?
Yes, but I do want to say that's symbolic of the role and the presence that a congressperson has to have throughout the entirety of the district. You can't just be in Washington all the time. You'll be there about 75–80% of the time, you know it. But you have to be committed to having a presence and a face throughout this district, so absolutely.
Mr. Brewbaker?
Oh, I live here, right down the road.
Well, check your calendars, please, I'll be in touch. Mr. Figurs, I'm gonna start with you for closing, and how much time do we have for closing? 3 minutes again for closing, and you're up.
Well, thanks again for having us and giving us this platform and this opportunity to have this conversation. Look, I want to end with where I began, and that's that. Look, the economy, the jobs, the workers, the companies, the business owners. That's what drives America. That's what's going to drive this district. That's what's going to drive the future of this country. And so putting somebody in Washington that goes there with that focal point, with that care, with that concern, with that focus is critical. And so, you know, in Washington, you know, we hear a lot about the dysfunction in Washington and the noise in Washington and the disagreement, but the checks are still getting cut. Sometimes they're getting cut a little late, but they're still getting cut. And as long as those checks are being cut, I will be in Washington making sure that those checks are being cut to the communities across District 2. We have to. There are too many priorities that rely on it. I want to make sure that we're living longer in this state, as I mentioned. I want to make sure that we're bringing in life's infrastructure into too many of these counties. We have several counties in this district that don't even have a single apartment complex. A single apartment complex. How do you go recruit a business when you don't have places for them to live? We have too many places in this district that still have schools that our kids are going into that's the same building that their grandparents and their great-grandparents went to school in. How can you recruit and retain the best teachers when you don't have modernized school infrastructure? We have too many communities that don't have broadband infrastructure. How can we plan for jobs of the future? How can we have communities where we want kids to come back to our communities, but they can't get on the internet? We were in a pre-recorded debate the other day and they asked us a question about our views about TikTok. I told them we got a lot of problems in this district, but TikTok ain't one of them. Especially in communities where they can't even get on the internet. Right? And so that's the realities of the district that we're in. But we got a lot of problems, but we got a lot of hope. And we got a lot of potential. We got a lot of great people, a lot of great minds, a lot of great leaders, a lot of great companies. We have a great future in this district. And I want to be the vessel that is responsible for going to Washington, D.C. and making sure that America pays what it owes to Montgomery, to Tuskegee, to Mobile, to Phoenix City, to Eufaula, to Jackson, to Evergreen, to Greenville, to Union Springs, to Laverne. We can do it. And I have the experience to do it because I've been there. I've been in Washington. I've been in the halls of Congress. I've been in the committee rooms. I have the relationships. I know the staffers that can help drive this. And so I ask for your support and your prayers and your patience as we go towards this runoff election on the 16th. And knock on wood, hopefully in November. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brewbaker.
First, thank you. We need more meetings like this throughout the district. Look, if you live in Montgomery or anywhere in the river region, you know me. You know my service in the legislature. Very focused on taking a problem-solving approach to problems that face the city, to problems that face state agencies, and was very successful, all in all, of coming up with solutions that actually work. Whether it was virtual schools or, I remember when the head of the Alabama Department of Youth Services came and was talking about families that had kept foster kids long-term but never adopted them. The question was, why not? Well, they hadn't prepared for higher ed. We passed the Fostering Hope Scholarship Bill. If you're otherwise qualified and was ever awarded the state, you can go to college in Alabama tuition-free to any state-supported 2 or 4-year school. Got a bunch of foster kids out of foster status into families. And what I mean by that is it's a problem-solving approach. It's not ideological. Our problems are complex, whether it's the border or fentanyl or economic growth. But people of goodwill coming together can solve them. I'm one of those people. I think I proved it with the service I gave in the legislature, and I'd like the opportunity to do it in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
Well, thank you guys for hosting this. It's been a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to speak to the voters, especially business leaders in our community. But we have to understand one thing. There's a difference between working for a politician and actually being an effective politician. We have to send someone to Washington, D.C. that understand the political process, that have a track record of getting things done in a very difficult situation. Someone that's not afraid to work across the aisle to get things done. Because at the end of the day, regardless of who's in charge, as a member of Congress, you're expected to deliver for your district no matter who the presidency or who the majority is in the House. And so look at the experience that I've had here in Montgomery. As a House Minority Leader, I've championed legislation through creating the School of Cybersecurity and Engineering, the first of this kind, where students across the state of Alabama are able to go to that particular school. Or whether it's passing the bill to eliminate the income tax on overtime pay so that hourly workers will have an opportunity to take home more money for them and their families because of inflation. Someone that signs checks on the front, not the back, as a small business owner. That have been in the state of Alabama for the last 10 years as a small business owner and working on the front lines for you and fighting for you every day. You've seen me fight for you. You've seen the results of the fight that I have. You've seen me work and stand up for the principles and not back down. You've seen me stand up for the IVF and force the other side to pass something so that individuals that are last best chance to bring life into this world had an opportunity to do so. You've seen me fighting over the prison system, the overcrowdedness in the prison system, and focusing on workforce development in the different regions throughout the state of Alabama. Or creating a school for workforce development for construction workers and others that are in other careers. Or adding more pre-K classrooms. So there's a difference between actually having the receipts and wanting the receipts. I'm proven. I've been there on the front lines. I've helped communities like Tuskegee or Lowndes County with their infrastructure. I've helped communities like Selma after the tornado and making sure that there were money in the budget to help them. I've created pilot projects that's going on today that have shown some more success than we've seen in a long time. I've invested $2 million in 9 out of 18 Title I schools in North Alabama. For our certified teachers to make $50 an hour to teach reading and math to those struggling students, but challenging those students that are level 2 and level 3 that gets it. So that we're increasing the rigor for them to have a brighter future. So I've been here. I don't have to take an airplane to get to this district. I live in this district. I've been representing this district. I have a home in this district. And I've always stood up for this state and the entire state, the state of Alabama, including Montgomery and all our rural communities. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for being so giving of your time. I know I speak for everyone in the room that we really sincerely appreciate your respect for one another, your willingness to serve, and your giving of your time. I'm going to take off my chamber hat for just a minute and put just on my former member of Congress hat. And I just want to tell you that even though the district lines have changed, I will always care deeply for the people of Alabama too. And I just want you all to know, and any representative here from Caroleene's campaign as well, it gives me great hope to know in this political environment that the people of Alabama too have a choice between so many qualified candidates that care deeply about our state and our communities. And so again, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and my family that sacrificed so much for a decade for your willingness, particularly in this environment, to put your name on the ballot. So thank you each for your time. On behalf of the Montgomery Chamber, thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. I'm sure the candidates, if their time permits, would be willing to stick around and answer any hard questions that I didn't ask. And we'll find out later on if I get asked to do this again. Anyway, thank you all. Karen?
Best moderator, you can count on us asking you to do it again. Thank you, candidates, for, it really means a lot for you to take the time to be with us and discuss all these important issues. And thanks to all of you for being here and supporting the chamber, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you.